Omar Ahmed, IFL TV, MTK Global. We're in Leeds. That means it's a Josh Warrington fight week. He defends his world title against an unknown quantity, let's say. Do you know anything about the opponent, John?
Well, he's a southpaw. He's been around for quite a while. He's been a pro since 2006, and he's only got one defeat, I think, on his record, hasn't he? And he's he's been good enough to be European champion. He's had the IBF international belt, and he's ranked number 4 with the IBF. So he was the highest ranked opponent who was available for the date. And you've got to respect the fact that he comes in on the back of a long unbeaten run, and it represents a massive opportunity for him. It's easy to say it's an easy bowl over for Josh Warrington, but as we all know in boxing, it doesn't always work out that way.
So, last time we saw Josh in action was against Kid Galahad. Now, there's a lot of controversy around this whole situation with Kid Galahad, because he's been ordered to fight for a final eliminator for Josh's title again. So he could be mandatory again for Josh Warrington if he wins that fight. What do you make of that, John?
Well, I didn't see I didn't commentate on the last fight. I was over in Las Vegas at the time, but obviously I caught up on it afterwards. And yeah, I mean, I thought Josh won the fight, and I thought he won it, by 2 or 3 rounds. But I respect the fact that other people thought differently, and he made it an awkward night for Josh. But whether or not there's a huge appetite among fight fans to see the fight again, I'm not convinced. But that's not necessarily the way it works, And Barry's a good fighter. He's very clever at what he does, and if he manoeuvres himself into another position where he's the mandatory challenger, then that's the way it works. But I'm sure that, so far as Josh is concerned, he'd very much prefer to look in search of unification fights.
Definitely, the IBF might make an exception if a unification fight can be made. I'm guessing so. They are strict though, the IBF. What fight would you like to see with Josh? Would you like to see him super feather with Valdez, Shakur Stevenson at featherweight?
I think Valdez is probably a better fight for Josh than Shakur Stevenson. I think Shakur Stevenson is an awkward one. He's a coming talent, but I don't think maybe that Josh needs him. I think there are probably other directions to go, which would be, and Valdez would be an obvious one. Yeah.
What about a potential rematch with Carl Frampton? I mean, it was a cracking fight first time.
Well, that was the best fight of last year. It was recognised as such by the Boxing Board of Control. It was made Fight of the Year, and I think rightly so. That was a fabulous contest. They both went at it absolutely hammer and tongs from word go. And at the end of the 3rd round, it was one of those where you pinched yourself and thought, God, what am I watching here? It was a tremendous fight. And if Carl can battle his way back to being a viable challenger, obviously economically it's a big sell, isn't it? Whether here in Leeds or in Manchester or maybe even over in Belfast, it's a big fight. And I think both the guys, both Josh and Carl, would like to do that again. I'd certainly like to commentate on it.
I bet you would. Yeah, where do you rank that in sort of the best fights you've commentated on?
Well, that's got to be up there in recent years. You go back. If I go back to sort of the 80s, 90s, you look at Nigel Benn, Gerald McClellan, and you look at those Morales Barrera fights and some of those. But in more recent times, that was absolutely right up there. The atmosphere was stunning, and both guys gave it absolutely everything, and it was lovely to see the respect between the two fighters afterwards, wasn't it? I mean, that's always one of the most appealing things about boxing, and they just gave it in. There was loads of that between the two of them, and that's why I think if the opportunity arose, I think they would like to do it again.
Okay, moving away from Josh Warrington, you mentioned a name there, Nigel Benn. He returns at age 55, I think, after 23 years on a pay-per-view platform. We haven't spoken to you about this, John. It's official now. What do you make of his return?
I don't like it. If Nigel was here now, I'd say it to his face. I'm not just. I just think it's bad for boxing. He's 55 years old. I was there in '96 when he fought Steve Collins, And I remember him taking the ring microphone and speaking to the crowd in Manchester and saying, you know, I'm sorry, I think he'd retired after 5 rounds, hadn't he? And he took the microphone and he said, I've not got it anymore, I can't do this anymore. Now that was 1996, and he'd had some big fights, some hard fights, you know. I mean, obviously what happened to Gerald McClellan was tragic for Gerald McClellan, but I don't think Nigel Benn was the same fighter after that either. Whether medically, physically, or whether it was just psychologically, I mean, I don't really know. But that was 23 years ago. No matter how fit he is, I don't think that he can possibly be able to take a punch as he would in 1996. And I just personally think, I'm going to be careful what I say here, but I don't think it's good for the sport. If Nigel Benn were to get hurt, that would do untold damage for boxing.
Okay, just rounding off on a slightly lighter note, Tyson Fury's been causing a stir in America in WWE. What have you made of it all, John?
Well, I've been watching it. We all have, haven't we?
Yeah, of course.
You know, you get on YouTube and see him. I know when he was banging out those security staff, I don't think there was a single punch landed there. He supposedly knocked out about 12 people.
Oh, no.
You watch it slowly, and I don't think he connected with anybody. He's having fun, isn't he? You know, he's got his family there, and he's presumably earning a few quid doing it. And fair play. You know, Tyson's made for WWE, isn't he? The way he shouts off and plays the pantomime villain, he's loving it. He's having fun. Why not?
Definitely, and I think there's a case to be made that he's probably the most known heavyweight in America right now.
Well, he's certainly not doing his profile any harm, is he? Going and engaging in those sort of shenanigans, and it's opening up a new audience as well, isn't it?
Well, if Wilder can do the business against Ortiz, I'm sure kind of the promotion is well underway for that Wilder Fury 2 fight.
Well, Wilder's already saying, yeah, it's signed, it's done. You know, so he can talk all he likes about wanting to fight Ruiz or Joshua, but the fact of the matter is that the contract's done, and he will fight Tyson Fury, or be in breach of contract. And I think for both of them, that's it's a monster fight. Whether or not Tyson's going to be ready for February 22, we'll see.
Have you heard anything, John, about the cut?
Well, he had his stitches out very quickly, didn't he? And I've seen the film and seen pictures of him, and he appears to have healed remarkably well and remarkably quickly. Whether or not he's having to have plastic surgery as well, or whether he's had that, I don't know. But you know, he seems to be getting himself right, and I've not heard anything definite to suggest that February 22nd can't happen. So at the moment, I've got it penciled into my diary, you know.
Well, I think you'll be all right with the WWE, as seeing they don't really throw any punches or real ones, so the cut will be okay for that. He can mess about in that all he wants. John, thank you very much for your time here in Leeds. I'm sure we'll catch up during the week again.
Okay, you're welcome.
Cheers.